Hey, Jay Carper here from American Torah, and I'm going to read from Genesis 19 and 2 Peter chapter 2, starting from the beginning of Genesis 19. Now the two angels came to Sodom in the evening, and Lot was sitting in the gate of Sodom. When Lot saw them, he rose to meet them, and he bowed himself with his face toward the ground. And he said, "Hear now, my lords, please turn into your servant's house and spend the night, and wash your feet. Then you may rise early and go on your way." And they said, "No, but we will spend the night in the open square." But he insisted strongly, so they turned into him and entered his house. Then he made them a feast and baked unleavened bread, and they ate. Now before they lay down, the men of the city, the men of Sodom, both old and young, all the people from every quarter, surrounded the house. And they called to Lot and said to him, "Where are the men who came to you tonight? Bring them out to us, that we may know them carnally." So Lot went out to them through the doorway, shut the door behind him, and said, "Please, my brethren, do not do so wickedly. See now, I have two daughters who have not known a man. Please let me bring them out to you, and you may do to them as you wish. Only do nothing to these men, since this is the reason they have come under the shadow of my roof." And they said, "Stand back." Then they said, "This one came in to stay here, and he keeps acting as a judge. Now we will deal worse with you than with them." So they pressed hard against the man Lot, and came near to break down the door. But the men reached out their hands and pulled Lot into the house with them, and shut the door. And they struck the men who were at the doorway of the house with blindness, both small and great, so that they became weary trying to find the door. All right, and then 2 Peter chapter 2, verses 6 through 9. God, turning the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah into ashes, condemned them to destruction, making them an example to those who afterward would live ungodly, and delivered righteous Lot, who was oppressed by the filthy conduct of the wicked. For that righteous man dwelling among them tormented his righteous soul from day to day by seeing and hearing their lawless deeds. Then the Lord knows how to deliver the godly out of temptations, and to reserve the unjust under punishment for the day of judgment. Now, there's a whole lot we could say about Sodom and all the terrible things that were going on there, and how much modern society resembles Sodom, and how we're just asking for God's judgment. But that's not the point of this video. I actually want to talk about Lot and how Peter called him righteous. You know, earlier in Genesis, we learned about how, Lot and Abraham had this falling out, and, Lot was kind of selfish. He wanted the best for himself. He was kind of a foolish guy. For one thing, he wanted to live in the city of Sodom. That really doesn't say much for his character. Later on, some terrible things happened with his daughters, and this is probably a result of him living in Sodom and exposing his daughters to these people. And yet Peter still calls him righteous. Just like in the previous chapter, there were some things that Abraham did with these visitors that revealed certain characteristics of Abraham that God really valued, and why Abraham was called the friend of God. And here, in this section, where Lot deals with these two visitors out of the three, we can see why Peter calls Lot a righteous man. See, the angels, these two visitors, Lot didn't know they were angels yet. These angels weren't there visiting just to see the evil of Sodom. Because of the deal Abraham struck with them, they were also there to test Lot, to see if he was a righteous man. Now, we can see four characteristics of Lot in how he interacted with these two men. The first one is that Lot was proactive in being hospitable. He didn't wait for them to go look for a place to live or to come to him. Of course, they knew who Lot was. He went to them. As soon as he saw them in the square, he rose up and went to them. He didn't run because he was in the town. Like when Abraham saw them coming on the road, they're probably only a few yards away. When they declined and said they would spend the night there in the town square, Lot insisted that they come and stay with him. He wanted to take care of these men, and he didn't necessarily tell them that the Sodomites were evil people. He was just really insistent about wanting to extend his hospitality to them. The second thing is that Lot was humble. Just like when Abraham approached these visitors on the road, Lot bowed himself to the ground and called them lords. Interestingly, Abraham used the singular Lord, Lot used the plural. So, which indicates that Abraham had a little more spiritual insight, perhaps, than Lot did. Third thing is that Lot was very generous, like Abraham. He didn't just, feed them leftovers or, crumbs or, just basic fare that they would normally have for dinner. He fed them a feast. He wanted them to stay the night, not just come for dinner. And he, wash their feet. He wanted to not just give them a place to shelter from the evil people of Sodom. He wanted to be a good host, to give them a lot more than your average visitor might expect. The fourth thing is that Lot was protective. He knew that Sodom was a very dangerous place for strangers. The only thing he knew about these men is they weren't from Sodom. And so he was going to bring them into his house because he knew they couldn't be as bad as the people of Sodom. He brought them there specifically to protect them. When Sodom came to attack these men, Lot said, "No, this is the reason I brought them here, to protect them from you, so you can't have them." He wanted them to stay the night with him because he knew that the night was dangerous, and he told them, first thing in the morning, you need to get out of town. Now, here's one of the most controversial aspects of this story, and so hard for us to understand. Those men were outside his house demanding that they send those men out. Lot offered his daughters in their stead. He offered to sacrifice the lives, not just the lives, but everything of his daughters to keep these strangers safe. That's how sacred the hospitality and the protection of a host's roof is. In offering to sacrifice his own daughters, the angels not only saved Lot, but they saved his daughters too. And they would have saved his son-in-laws if they had been willing. They were probably his daughters' fiancés, if you will. They were probably betrothed because his daughters were still unmarried virgins. Either that or Lot had other daughters that were married and living out in Sodom. And this also reminds me of Abraham, because God tested Abraham later by telling him to give up Isaac, kill Isaac. But Abraham trusted God and his promises, and God rewarded that by saving Isaac, not just saving him, but by multiplying and turning him into many nations. Lot's daughters also became nations because Lot was willing to put himself out for total strangers, because he was willing to protect them with the lives of himself and his family. He put himself in danger before he put his daughters in danger. Because he was willing to do that, God rewarded him. God rewarded him by saving his daughters, and even through their later unrighteousness, he turned them into nations. This was the test to see whether Lot was a righteous man. When there are strangers in your town, and you know that they are in a dangerous place, do you risk your own family by bringing them into your house? Or do you let them suffer the consequences of their own ignorant actions? And God apparently wanted Lot to risk his reputation, his own life, his family's lives for the sake of strangers. And God took that humility, that generosity, and credited that to Lot as righteousness, and saved his life and the lives of his family. This is Jay Carper from American Torah. Be generous, be humble, be protective, and be blessed.